Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Uphold. My name is Dr. Martin Hiesboeck. I'm the head of research at Uphold, a multi-asset platform active around the world with a big and growing institutional business. And my guest today is Brandon Hargreaves from the HBAR Foundation. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You're based, you told me before, in Philadelphia. How's the weather there?
It's a little bit chilly, but not too bad. Last month it was down, -10 Celsius at least. I think it was actually even colder than that, but at least we're in the positive digits at this point.
You're not suffering like the world's elite in Davos at freezing temperatures.
Not quite that bad.
I doubt that they suffer, though. Let's get to the point. Hedera has been in the news a bit. I was just at the Hedera house here in Davos yesterday. Well set up. So you are with the foundation. I'm a little bit confused at what's Hedera, what is a foundation, why is one called. So can you tell us the whole structure of how it works and how you got into this?
Sure. So I read the Hashgraph white paper, and Hashgraph is the algorithm that underpins Hedera, the public network. I read that back in 2017, and I remember thinking, and I had been, investing in cryptocurrencies and things like that, going all the way back to 2014, 2015. So, I read it, and I was like, if they ever build a public network on this, I certainly want to be involved. And I became a Hedera ambassador, and just really enjoyed it for years leading up to this past year, where I actually left a 20-year career in another industry to come over to Hedera. I came over to the HBAR Foundation. I handle community outreach, keeping everybody in the loop with weekly shows of everything that's being built on Hedera and things along those lines. And, we do Twitter spaces weekly, things along those lines. And then as a little side project, you can't be involved with Hedera without wanting to build. So entrepreneurial route as well. I'm building an app on Hedera. We have a little startup, and hopefully we can talk about that a little bit as well.
We will. You said we were coming from another industry. The basic start of any networking conversation I've had the last 3 days was, which industry are you coming from?
Sure.
And there's an awful lot of bankers from traditional banks moving into the blockchain space. It's really booming.
I've always been fascinated with investing and economics and things along those lines. I actually wrote a small book on the history of banking. But the industry I was in before was oil and gas. I was an offshore installation manager and a master on a ultra deep water drill ship. But you can't help where your passions lie, and it certainly brought me to Hedera.
We're going to get those oil trades onto the Hedera blockchain, That's
well, a tradfi exchange called Digital Commodities Exchange just got built on Hedera, and hopefully they can expand into oil as well.
Wow. Everything will move to blockchain and tokenization. I'm still not very clear why one is called Hedera, the other was the HBAR Foundation, and there's the Swiss HBAR Foundation that I came across. How do they all fit together?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of decentralization that's taking place on Hedera. One is the network itself. So right now, all of the nodes are run by the 27 council members, and there's a big blue chip Fortune 500.
Names, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got LG and Google and Shinhan and Tata Communications, ServiceNow, Boeing. I mean, I can go down the list of everybody, but yeah, really big names.
Involved? Why is it them that chose Hedera, or how did this come to be? No other blockchain has this kind of caliber of big firms.
Sure. So initially Mance and Lehman. So Mance was initially the CEO of Hedera, and Lehman was the chief scientist running the algorithm and all that kind of stuff. And before they even got to Hedera, they knew that they were going to have good governance, and they wanted to make sure that whoever was running the governance was going to be the users. And the highest bar they could have was the enterprises that they wanted to use. And if it can be used by enterprises, it can be used by everybody else, startups and smaller companies just the same. So if those big enterprises were going to be the main users, those were the ones that we wanted to govern the network. It was pie in the sky initially. They said they wanted to get all these Fortune 500 companies, and people thought that they were absolutely crazy. But as mentioned, they've done a fantastic job putting that together. So that's Hedera, essentially the governing council, and there's a board of directors and things like that. But they've split off Mance used to be the CEO of Hedera, and as I said, Lehman was the chief scientist. He's the inventor of the hash graph algorithm. But they've split off to Swirlds Labs, their own company, and they focus mainly on the code base, making sure the network is running well, and they're going to have consulting and things like that for building on Hedera as well. But I am with the HBAR Foundation. They were granted 5 billion HBAR, that's 10% of the total supply of the cryptocurrency, to build out the ecosystem for Hedera. And that's what we've been doing. We've been really busy. They've only been in existence for a little bit over a year at this point, but we've gotten all kinds of stuff accomplished. You mentioned the Swiss Hash Graph Association. They're a similar entity, right? So again, decentralization. We don't all have to be doing it in the same direction. So they're doing something similar as well. So that's how everything's breaking up as far as operations.
So you got 5 billion HBAR. Spare some change, man. That's a lot of HBAR.
It is, and they've done a fantastic job taking care of that treasury and making sure we're building in the network. They identified several different verticals that we needed to build in, and we did.
We've just been through a rather disastrous, tumultuous year. I'm not going to ask you what happened last year. I'm going to ask you what is happening now. Who is building on Hedera? What kind of projects are you most excited about?
Well, we certainly don't shy away from 2022. A lot happened in 2022, but it was more about establishing those relationships with people and enterprises that are going to build on top of us. And DeFi is certainly something big that not only did we get involved with that last year, but we actually started to launch things. So Saucer Swap is one of our dexes on Hedera, and they're doing a fantastic job. We have Stater, which is it's a liquid staking solution, and that's being used on our dexes as well. We have HeliSwap, and then we have additional ones that are going to be coming on line soon. We have HSuite, we have Lehman Swap, we have another one that's going to be coming over from another ecosystem. Pangolin Dex is going to be coming over, so we're certainly excited about that. We have a lot going on in TradFi as well. We have a traditional exchange for commodities called the Digital Commodities Exchange, and they launched on Hedera. And initially, they are just using it to add trust. But within the next 6 months, they want to shift to actually making it similar to a DEX. So it's going to be run with smart contracts and tokenization and everything else. And it's really important for the commodities trading industry because these tokens, they're going to be like NFTs. You can have multiple files on Hedera NFTs. So you might have the contract at the top. You might have the insurance attached to it. You might have, a bunch of different things that are all attached to that contract. And that, of course, can be then traded through smart contracts. So that's fun as well. One of our governing council members, and I'm going to ramble on because there is all kinds of stuff to talk about.
Ramble on.
But one of our council members, Aberdeen, has $500 billion worth of assets under management. $500 billion, not billion, $500 billion worth of assets under management. And they said they want
to outdo you, but Uphold Securities customers manage about $4 trillion. The market is insanely big for blockchain. We've only really started, right?
It is. There's no question. But they want to start tokenizing their funds on Hedera. And yeah, it'll be fantastic. They want to start doing that this year in 2023. Some of the other things we're looking at, one of the other governing councils, DLA Piper, has a subsidiary called Toko, and they are focused on tokenization of securities. And because they have the legal know-how, not only can they do it from a technical perspective, but they can do it from a legal perspective to make sure everything is compliant as well. And they're already coming on board with bonds and things along those lines. So everything in TradFi is going great. And, with Larry Fink from BlackRock coming out and saying not only is the future of securities and traditional financial markets going to be tokenization, it's going to be tokenization on public blockchains. And, we think Hedera is really well positioned for that. We love gaming as well. Again, Martin, if you want to stop me, you can at any point.
No, I'm listening. I'm a sponge. I'm just absorbing information here. If I have questions, I will interrupt you. Please go ahead.
Fantastic. All right. So the other thing is, of course, metaverse. We have a thriving NFT space, but it's been really interesting to see our gaming space start to take off. So
Why is the gaming space taking off? Is it just that people are discovering that blockchain gaming is a thing, or does the Hedera blockchain have any innate advantages for gaming?
I think it's the similar advantage that you see across now. Hedera, we can certainly get into the things that makes Hedera special. But
Let's do that. I'd like to know that.
okay, so we'll get to
And the
gaming here.
reason why I want to know that is because I was just in Dubai
Mhm,
a couple of months ago at the Algorand annual bash,
mhm.
and to be honest, I had no idea that Algorand gaming was a thing. And then it was explained to me that finality in blockchain, uh, instant finality or neo finality, whatever you want to call it, is important for gaming.
Oh,
What's your take
absolutely.
on this?
I can't speak to Algorand or any of the things that they're doing, but of
Mhm.
course, there's a bunch of different things that we look at to compare these different platforms. Speed being one of them, and speed you can break up into a couple things. You can look at time to consensus, time to finality, and you can look at throughput. So as far as throughput, Hedera right now the network is throttled down to 10,000 transactions per second. It can handle many tens of thousands of transactions per second if we wanted to lift that throttle. But it's also designed to be sharded. So break the network into different parts that can then speak to one another. And with that, we can have essentially unlimited scaling, but also our time to consensus. And it's not just time to consensus, but actual finality. Blockchains, for the most part, as far as I understand, they're probabilistic. They don't come to true finality. Hedera actually comes to true finality, and we actually just had some improvements come out to our gossip protocol that has reduced our already fast time to consensus from about 4.8 seconds down to about 3.5 seconds. And that just happened over the last week. And you don't have to take my word for it on that. You can go take a look at Metrica. They cover all kinds of different blockchains. You can go ahead and look at what kind of transactions we're processing. That's another thing we can get into because we just had a huge use case come online. But we've also had that drop in time to consensus. Security is really important, and I actually haven't heard any other platforms tout that they reach the level of security Hedera does. It's called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. It's the gold standard in security. And once again, you don't have to take our word for it. Carnegie Mellon did a COQ proof on Hedera to prove that it actually reaches that gold standard of security. And that's really important to actually get us to finality as well. And then efficiency. Okay, that's what allows us to have those super low fees. There's plenty of hyper efficient networks out there, but Hedera, at least according to a study done by the University College London, is the most efficient in the world, to the tune of
What does efficiency mean here?
the pretty much the electricity that's necessary or the power that's necessary to process a transaction.
The energy consumption.
Mhm.
Do you think this is there have been attacks, especially in 2022 in Europe at the European Union, people blaming proof of work blockchains. Even there was a discussion about banning proof of work and all that. How important do you think is the energy discussion in blockchain?
I think it's critical. I think it's not just about energy consumption from an environmental standpoint, which is very important, but it's also important from a dollars and cents standpoint. Again, that gets us those lower transaction fees. Now, what Bitcoin has done in some of these places to be able to capture the output when maybe there's not the demand. I think that's fascinating as well. So just because it's proof of work, I'm not going to, poo-poo it and say it's not good. I think that there's some really interesting things that are being done in proof of work. But if you just want to get that transaction cost in power or dollars and cents down really low, you want to talk about efficiency. And certainly being proof of stake is important for that. But Hedera is 9,000 times more efficient than Ethereum. Now, that's not Ethereum proof of work. That's Ethereum
Like
proof of stake. So
that,
ETH2.
that's a very low bar.
It is. It is. Well, okay. Let's put it this way. It's 90 times more efficient than Algorand. And again, this is according to University College London. This
Yeah.
isn't me putting that out or Hedera putting that out. This was an independent study. And then it's 128 times more efficient than a centralized system, Visa. So when people wonder what is the value of blockchain or of DLT technology, there it is. When you have this system, the payment system that the world is running on, VisaNet, and it's 128 times more efficient, it opens all kinds of doors, and it's you can't really argue that it's important from many different aspects.
If you allow, I'm going to give you an answer now that is not my answer. That was actually put to me by a banker, and he said, VisaNet works, right? Billions of people use, and the transactions, it works. I take my phone, I go to the supermarket, I have my phone there, it's paid. Why do we need blockchain payments? Why do we need blockchain in finance at all? Our systems work, don't they?
Oh, this is the question?
This is the question that was put to me.
Well, I think the answer is VisaNet compared to Hedera, 128 times more efficient. And the things that you can start to do with micropayments really starts to really get interesting. It opens up. I mean, I see micropayments as a true frontier use case. It really was not possible until you got to the point where you could be this efficient with transactions. And it's not just the power consumption, right? So Visa has shareholders, and nothing wrong with Visa. As you mentioned, they've done a fantastic job for a really long time, but I think they're going to start to incorporate this stuff. But they have overhead, they have shareholders, they have employees, they have all that kind of stuff that makes it less efficient from a dollars and cents standpoint as well. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens with micropayments, because it really wasn't possible before what we're seeing now with DLT technology.
We've discussed briefly what you can build on. Give us some great examples of what are you excited about? Who is building what projects?
Sure. So let's go back to gaming. We were already kind of talking about that. There is a company called Lithos. They just started, but the two executives there are former PlayStation. They were responsible for some of the most popular games of all time. You'll probably recognize the names of the games they were responsible for because they've been made into movies and TV shows. So Last of Us, Uncharted, things like that. Well, they want to build a Web3 game, and it's going to be called Ashfall. They want to leverage Hedera in a few ways, but one of the ways is, of course, using NFTs for in-game assets. So that's one of the examples. Super excited about things that are happening in the environmental space as well. So Hedera becomes a home for environmental use cases because of that environmental efficiency. So we have Timeliz, we have Totem Earth, we have Envisions the Guardian that sets the standards for the space, and they're doing things across the board. So, but probably the one that I'm most excited about is carbon marketplaces, taking fragmented marketplaces and getting them into a standard so they can be traded efficiently across all markets.
By fragmented carbon markets, you mean that every country has their own regulations, that there are different technologies, different approaches to carbon credits? Do you see a global carbon standard emerging?
I do. I would probably defer. We have some great people at the Sustainable Impact Fund at Hedera, and I'd love to get them on here. They could go into a lot more of the details, but the fragmented, you're right, because different regulations in different places, but also the standardization, because these carbon credits aren't all created equal, right? So that's another thing as far as standardization that we would like to see.
You mentioned that you yourself are building on Hedera. What are you doing?
I am. So it is hard to be exposed to the capability of a network like Hedera and not want to build on it. So I have a startup called Twigital. We're just starting to barely come out of stealth. I think we're probably going to be entering open beta probably in another 4 to 6 weeks. But what we're doing is we're leveraging photogrammetry. Photogrammetry has been around for maybe 10 or 15 years.
I think you need to explain this. What is photogrammetry?
I think, yeah, absolutely. So photogrammetry is taking dozens or hundreds of pictures of an object and then stitching those images into a 3D rendering or 3D object. A 3D rendering probably isn't the right way to say it, because a rendering is something that's computer generated. This is actual pictures that create the 3D image. It's really impressive. It took a lot of heavy-duty hardware in the past, and that by hardware I mean the cameras that had to take the pictures to get good high-resolution pictures. But now with these amazing devices and the amazing cameras we have on our phones, they are pretty heavy duty. So that takes care of that part of it. The other part of it is the software. To stitch all these things together, it took some heavy duty software as well. But now there's some advancements. It's part of our secret sauce, so I'm not going to put that out. But it allows us to create these 3D objects fairly simply. And then we're going to use Hedera to mint these into NFTs. So you'll be able to create several of these 3D renderings. Once you're happy with the way it looks, you can go ahead and mint an NFT from it. An example of what we could use it for. This is something that was fun. I went down another business that's building on top of Hedera is a new sports league called Karate Combat. It's like MMA. It's like a strike league. And they have George St. Pierre, which in my opinion is the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. He's one of their commentators. But so I went down to their last event. Their other commentator is Bas Rutten. If anybody knows about MMA, he's a fantastic legend in the space as well. But I got them both to sign one of the Karate Combat gloves. I don't know if you guys can see that. That's George St. Pierre and Bas Rutten. And then I got the other glove signed by some of the fighters as well. So we're going to
do you do mixed martial arts?
Not for a long time, but yeah, there was a day. There was
a
day when
sport.
Yeah. Well, I was a wrestler mainly. I trained with some guys along those lines, but for the most part, I was a wrestler. But still, super impressed with the sport as a whole. But either way, I can certainly talk about what Karate Combat is building. But as far as Twigital, we want to go ahead and Twigitize these gloves, right? Use them for promotion for Karate Combat, for Twigital, for Hedera. And then again, you can have multiple files. So I can have the main file be the 3D rendering, and then the files under it be George St. Pierre signing the glove, a certificate of authenticity, maybe an interview that I did with George St. Pierre. And you could apply that to all different kinds of things. But that's one of the nice things about being able to support multiple files on Hedera NFTs. So that's what we're looking at there.
Where do you see Hedera going in this year? So before that, what do you think of the next year? A little bit of, it's January. We need to have a bit of a positive spin or a view ahead. What do you think this year will bring?
I think there's going to be a shift, and I think Uphold could be a perfect example of this. We saw a lot of bad actors, a lot of fluff, and all that kind of stuff in the year prior. I think the cream is going to rise, whether that's with centralized exchanges or whether that's with platforms. So last year, we spent a lot of our time establishing the grants. This year, a lot of those are going to be coming to market. We just had a very high volume use case hit the Hedera network. It took us from, a few dozen transactions per second up to about 500 to 700 transactions per second. It's a large enterprise that's doing this.
Posted this on LinkedIn, I saw.
Yeah. So we're excited about it, and not only that, but we're excited about what it represents. So a lot of it was theoretical. Of course, the network was tested at times. It was tested in testnet conditions. There were some tests prior that showed how much transactions we could handle, but doing it on a consistent basis for the last week, that's just exciting to see that the network can actually handle it. And again, this, even though they don't want to be too public about who it is yet, it's just good to see these enterprise use cases going live and showing what our network can do. And I think that's going to continue throughout the year. They're not all going to be use cases that bring to bear 500 transactions per second, but there's going to be some other exciting ones to come this year. So we're excited about that.
By the way, I'd like to thank you for your statement about Uphold. The last year has been actually very good for us, as people saw. I mean, we are, I think, the only financial institution in the world, except for central banks, where you can go to the website and see all our assets and liabilities in real time. I don't think anybody else in the world does that. And Uphold was built on this principle of absolute transparency. So the Hedera is going to have some milestones. Give us the alpha of what's next.
So what's next so I would say there's a path to decentralization. We already kind of talked about that in terms of the operations, but there's also a path to decentralization for the network itself. So the 27 nodes right now are maintained and run by the council members, 27 right now. It's eventually going to grow to 39. But the next thing I'm excited about is having trusted nodes. So other entities in this space are going to run nodes as well. Now, these have to be, because it has to handle so many transactions per second, pretty high horsepower nodes, right? So they initially want to start with trusted nodes. There's going to be a phase through there, and then eventually we're going to go ahead and get to anonymous nodes where anybody can run a node. But they're the founders of Hedera.
Explain the difference to me. An anonymous node versus
a trusted node. So if you had a trusted node, we'll say it's run by one of our DeFi exchanges. We'll say Saucer Swap wants to run one. They have to actually ask Hedera, we would like to run a node, and they make sure that they have the proper computer setup and everything's up to snuff to be able to actually run a node. And then later on, anonymous nodes, anybody can spin one up and start to create consensus. It's a pathway to decentralization. They're very methodical with how they do everything. You know, they want this to be a 100-year plus company organization, and they don't want to do anything wrong in the beginning to jeopardize that. So they're not going to take the next step until they're absolutely ready. But one thing that I've learned about Hedera, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. I've learned that over the past few years. I remember Time to Finality. I was watching that from the beginning. When we first went to open access, it was sitting at, I think, a little under 5 seconds. And as the network went on, it started to creep up, and it got over 7 seconds, and it was just a straight line up. And I remember asking Lehman straight up, I was like, what's going on here? Is this just going to continue to trend up? Because that's certainly not good for the network. And he's like, nope, I can take care of it. We just have to tune some things. It'll be fine. A few months later, an upgrade came out, and once again, it dropped right under 5 seconds. So that's just one example. Staking is another example. For years, Hedera was always supposed to be a proof of stake network, and it always ran as a proof of stake network, but there wasn't public staking, right? It was done through the council and things like that. So this year we actually came to staking where everybody can stake their HBAR. But that was another thing that people were like, hey, is this ever going to come? They've been saying this for the past 3-4 years. Are we ever going to see it? And it eventually comes to fruition. Another thing is that really high volume use case that I've been discussing. Mance came out and said there's going to be a step function change in Hedera usage in the future. And that was 1.5 years ago. I think he even expected it to come a lot sooner, but these enterprises move slowly at times. And it eventually came to fruition. So you learn to trust these guys.
When I started my career in blockchain, I gave up any idea of timelines and deadlines.
Exactly. The next
by the
one
way, public service announcement: Hedera HBAR staking is available on Uphold. And it's good. The easiest staking solution you can think of. You can just stake and unstake at any time. You don't have to commit a certain amount. Stake whenever you want to.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's one thing. I have my DeFi accounts, I have my my safe accounts and all that kind of stuff. But for ease of use and all that kind of stuff with DeFi, I make sure that I have some of my HBAR stored over there. So same thing with something like Uphold. There's plenty of traders out there that want to leverage your service, and if they don't want to give up on all those nice juicy staking rewards, they can utilize Uphold.
You mentioned gaming. Do you know that Uphold is actually a big gaming platform? We have lots of games use the Uphold wallet structure. It's a technical thing. We have master accounts and sub accounts, but lots of games run on Uphold without anybody knowing. Well, Brandon, I thank you very much for this insight. There are lots and lots and lots of questions. I've never seen more questions in any webinar on the screen there, and I'm absolutely swamped. I have no idea how I'm going to get to any of these questions. So my suggestion is, if you listeners and watchers, if you have a real problem with your account, you need to open a ticket, because I'm really not capable of doing customer service. Thank you for all the people who love us. And if you have genuine questions, I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open. Just send me your questions. It's not just me. There's other people looking at my Twitter DMs too. I'm sure we can answer all of your questions. I hope this was an informative webinar. Thank you very much, Brandon, for joining us. I'd like to take you up on the offer to connect further, especially with the ESG and the energy stuff, because we have a panel planned, and Uphold Securities in New York is working closely with some of the mining companies. So we have a department that deals with energy, actually. And a part of Uphold Securities is actually doing alternative energy call. So energy is a big deal for us. Let's connect on that. Maybe do another webinar on one of the most specific topics. All the best from me, from Switzerland to Philadelphia, you said. Let's do this again soon, man. And don't get hurt in your in the what is it called? A ring? I don't know.
Oh, I'm just an observer at this
cage?
point.
Are you in the cage? Don't get
They have
hurt.
a pit. It's awesome. They have this pit. It's a great setup.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you so much.